The living room was filled with laughter, the kind that sounded cheerful but didn't quite reach the eyes. It was my birthday, yet something felt off. The cake sat in the center of the table, candles glowing warmly. Everyone was gathered, cousins, uncles, aunts, even my younger brother who usually skipped these things. But Dad hadn't looked at me once all evening. His jaw was clenched, his mood sour like something was bubbling under the surface. As the room quieted for the cake cutting, I took a breath, ready to make a wish. Then came the moment that would change everything. Dad stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. The room froze. "You're no longer family," he said, loud, sharp, and deliberate. The candles flickered. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. My hand froze midair over the cake. I looked around, some people awkwardly glanced at their plates, some just stared. No one moved. No one spoke. I locked eyes with Dad. His expression didn't soften. There was no regret, no confusion. Just cold certainty. My mother looked down, avoiding my gaze completely. My chest felt heavy, but I didn't break. I didn't cry. I straightened up, took a deep breath, and carefully pushed my chair back. Without a word, I walked toward the door. I heard someone whisper, "What's happening?" but I didn't turn back. No drama. No screaming. Just footsteps and the sound of my own heartbeat echoing louder than the entire room. The air outside hit me like a release. It was crisp and quiet, the night wrapping around me like an old friend. I walked to my car slowly, deliberately, refusing to let emotions take over. I sat down, closed the door, and let out the breath I had been holding. No tears came. Not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside me had already accepted this truth long before the words were said. I looked at my reflection in the mirror for a long second and said to myself softly, "So that's how it ends, huh?" Then I started the car and drove off. No destination. Just away. As I drove aimlessly that night, streetlights flickering past like memories, my mind didn't just stay in the moment. It wandered backward, as if digging through old photo albums I never asked to see again. I remembered being 7, clutching a crayon drawing I'd made just for Dad. It was sloppy, colorful, a scribbled mess that said, "Me and Daddy." I handed it to him with excitement, hoping for even a smile. He barely glanced at it before muttering, "Why don't you do something useful," and handed it back like it was trash. My little heart cracked that day, but I taped the drawing on my wall anyway. As if by looking at it every night, I could remind myself that maybe I was still his kid. Maybe someday he'd see me the way I wanted to be seen. Growing up, I was the quiet one. Not the smartest, not the most athletic. My older brother, Michael, was the golden child, varsity sports, straight A's, Dad's spitting image. My sister, Rachel, was the princess. She could do no wrong, and even when she did, they called it growing pains. I was, just there. The afterthought. The space filler. Still, I tried. Every birthday, every holiday, every school event, I showed up hoping that this time, Dad might say, "I'm proud of you." That maybe he'd ruffle my hair or clap me on the back like he did with Michael. But it never came. Instead, it was always, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Or worse, just silence. But I kept trying. Every Thanksgiving, I helped Mom in the kitchen while she talked about how busy everyone else was. Every Christmas, I handpicked thoughtful gifts, trying to make everyone smile. I thought if I just gave enough, eventually, they'd give back. That maybe love was like a vending machine, just keep putting in, and something good would come out. But it never did. One year, I saved up to get Dad a watch he'd admired in a store window. I was just a teenager, and it cost nearly everything I had from my part-time job. When I handed it to him, he looked at it, shrugged, and said, "It's nice, but I already have one." That was it. Not even a thank you. The worst part? I never stopped hoping. Especially on birthdays. I convinced myself that maybe this year would be different. That maybe he was waiting to surprise me, maybe he'd say something kind in front of the family. But instead, this year, he decided to erase me, on the day I was born. I pulled over to the side of the road that night, turned off the engine, and just sat in silence. Tears still didn't come. It was beyond that. I wasn't just hurt, I was hollow. A lifetime of trying to belong, only to realize I'd never been part of the picture in the first place. And yet, deep down, a flicker remained. Not of hope, but of resolve. If they could cut me out so easily, then maybe it was time I did the same. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But out of self-respect. Out of the need to stop bleeding for people who never offered me a band-aid. That night, I didn't sleep. I just made a decision. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't break down in front of the family. I simply left, the sound of my shoes tapping quietly against the floor as I walked away. The door closed behind me, and with it, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Not from relief, but from the absence of expectations. It wasn't a dramatic exit. It wasn't a loud goodbye. It was just nothing. I drove home in silence. The headlights sliced through the darkness, but the road ahead was blurry, like my vision had shifted somewhere between disbelief and something more final. When I got to the house, I sat in the car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, the engine running in the background. But I didn't rush inside. I sat there, thinking. No shouting. No tears. Just a slow, deliberate calm settling in. It was as if the chaos of that day had finally cleared, leaving behind something starkly clear. I didn't feel angry anymore. No, this was something deeper. Something more profound. They didn't want me in their present, so I wouldn't let them be a part of my future. Simple as that. The house felt empty when I walked inside. No festive decorations left to remind me of the day. It was just me, alone with my thoughts. I went to my desk, pulled open the drawer where I kept important papers, and slowly began sorting through them. The will. The trust. All those little things I'd never thought to change. Until now. I took a deep breath, my fingers gliding over the papers as I marked through their names. I didn't do it angrily. There was no rush. It was calm, meticulous. Each line I crossed out was a statement, a declaration of who I was choosing to be in my life moving forward. My father? Gone. My mother? Gone. Not that I hated them. No, it was far more calculated than that. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about taking back control. About refusing to remain a part of a family who had already shown me, with their words and actions, that they didn't care enough to even make an effort. I could hear Dad's voice in my head. You're no longer family. And I realized that the moment he said it, he'd already made the decision for me. But now, the decision was in my hands, and I wasn't going to play the victim anymore. I picked up my phone and sent the email to my lawyer, revoke all family benefits. Remove their names from the will. Begin finalizing the revisions. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. From power. From finally knowing I had the ability to shape my own future, without them. The silence around me felt different now. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. The kind of peace that comes from no longer begging for acceptance from people who have already shown you that you'll never get it. This was the calm before the storm. I wasn't ready to destroy everything they held dear just yet. But I was ready to make sure they wouldn't destroy me again. For years, I'd been the quiet provider. The one who picked up the pieces when things fell apart. I didn't demand thanks, I didn't expect praise. It was just how things worked. At first, it was subtle. Small things. When Mom's medical bills piled up, I paid them without question. She was getting older, and the health issues were more frequent. Each doctor's visit, each prescription, each new procedure that drained her savings, I took care of it all. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't announce it. It was just my duty as the good child, the one who always did what was expected, even if it meant sacrificing my own. Then there was Dad. The car. His pride and joy. It was an old model, barely functional, but he loved it. And when the transmission went, when the insurance wouldn't cover the repairs, I stepped in. I paid off the balance, cleared the debt. The car was running again, but he never knew who had really saved it. I never told anyone about the college fund I set up for my niece, Sarah. She was bright, hardworking, and had a future ahead of her. Her parents, though, were always stretched thin. So, without hesitation, I opened an account in her name, quietly adding to it over the years. I didn't ask for anything in return, just the hope that she would get the education I never had a chance to pursue. I never made them feel indebted. I never asked for acknowledgement. It was just the way I showed love, the only way I knew how. But that was before I realized they never really saw me. Not for who I was. Not for what I had sacrificed. The moment my father's words echoed in my ears, "You're no longer family," it hit me like a freight train. All these years, I had been invisible to them. They never saw the effort, the money, the time. They saw only what they could take. So, quietly, without drama or confrontation, I began to unravel it all. I started with Mom's medical expenses. The next bill came, and I didn't pay it. The doctors called, then the hospital sent reminders. I let them pile up, one after the other. It wasn't out of spite, not entirely. It was just a matter of prioritization. If they didn't value me enough to treat me like family, then I didn't owe them anything. Next came Dad's car. I contacted the bank and had the final payment reversed. The dealership called a few weeks later to inform him that the car was no longer his. He was confused, angry even, but he never asked me why. He simply cursed me, just like he'd cursed me on my birthday. Sarah's college fund was more painful to touch. She deserved better. But she was the only one who might understand the message. I called the financial advisor and requested a transfer. The account was closed. I didn't take the money for myself. But I made sure that no one else would benefit from it. It wasn't about the money. It was about removing myself from the invisible chains I'd been shackled to for so long. The silence grew heavier as days passed. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. They would figure it out, and when they did, it would be too late. The consequences of their words were already beginning to show. The first signs came quietly, almost unnoticed. A letter from the bank arrived for Dad, detailing overdue payments. At first, he thought it was just a mistake, some error in the system. But then another letter came. And another. The payments on the car were falling behind, the debt was climbing, and the phone calls from the dealership were becoming more frequent. Dad was always proud of his car. It was his escape, his little piece of control in a life that had slipped through his fingers over the years. But now, with each passing day, that little piece of pride was slipping away, and he didn't know who to blame. Mom's situation was just as bad. Her medical bills had piled up since the last treatment, but this time, there was no check from me to cover the costs. The hospital called twice, then 3 times, but the bills remained unpaid. Each time, she picked up the phone with more dread. The usual relief wasn't there anymore, the comfort that she could rely on me to fix things. Now, all she had was the mounting pressure. The letters started arriving. Legal notices. Warnings. Trusts that had once been securely in place, with the promise of future support, were being revoked. The family benefits, everything that had made their lives a little easier, was being pulled away, piece by piece. Mom began to panic. She tried reaching out to me, leaving messages, calling repeatedly. But I didn't answer. Not a single call. Not even a text. The silence was deafening. The tension inside the house grew thicker each day. Dad's frustration turned to anger, his voice rising in those rare moments when he spoke. What happened to all of it? He'd shout. Where's the money? Who's doing this to us? He tried to keep up appearances, pretending everything was fine, but it was obvious, they were sinking, and they had no idea why. Then, it was Mom's turn. The realization hit her like a wave. All the things she had relied on, all the things I had quietly taken care of, were now gone. With each passing day, the truth settled in deeper. It wasn't long before she finally picked up the phone and dialed my number. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. But I knew she'd keep trying. On the 4th attempt, I answered. I let the silence hang for a moment before I heard her voice. Soft, almost timid. Why did you do this? She asked. Her voice cracked with a mixture of hurt and confusion. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the pain of someone who had just realized the cost of their actions, who had just woken up to the reality that they had pushed someone away who had always been there. For a second, I considered saying something, anything to explain. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath, steadying myself. Because, I replied, my voice cold but controlled, I stopped including those who excluded me. There was a long silence on the other end. No response. No words of apology. Just the sound of her breathing, heavy with regret. And then, the line went quiet. She hung up. I could hear Mom's breathing on the other end of the line, each exhale more labored than the last. The silence between us stretched long, but I didn't break it. I just let her sit with her question. It was like a weight pressing down on both of us. I could feel the regret radiating from her, but I knew it was only part of the story. She wasn't just sorry for what she had lost, she was sorry because she was beginning to understand how deeply she had wronged me. When she finally spoke, it was in a tone I had never heard before, small, fragile, as if trying to piece together the broken fragments of something irreparable. I didn't mean for this to happen. We never meant to hurt you, she said, the words tumbling out like she had rehearsed them, but they fell flat. You know how Dad is. He doesn't mean it when he says things like that. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. Her excuses, her attempts to deflect the weight of what had just occurred, felt like an echo of every other time they had tried to explain away their actions. All those years of me being the good child because I didn't want to rock the boat, because I wanted to believe that somewhere deep down, they cared. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. No, Mom, I said quietly, my voice calm but unwavering. I know exactly what Dad meant when he said that. He meant it. And you did too. She didn't respond right away, so I continued. You see, all those years of me sacrificing, of me quietly taking care of things, picking up the pieces when things fell apart for you or for Dad, I did it because I believed I was loved. I believed that being there for you was enough. But what you didn't realize is that I was only being used. I could hear her gasp softly. She was still trying to process, still trying to put the puzzle pieces together, but she wasn't there yet. And then came that birthday, I continued, the words coming out more slowly now. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I finally realized I would never be good enough for you. It wasn't just the words Dad shouted. It was the look in his eyes. It was the way you all looked at me like I was just a tool to be used when needed. Mom opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her before she could interrupt. No, let me finish, I said, my tone firm but calm. For years, I put up with it. I let you all push me aside, let you all take what you wanted from me. Birthdays, holidays, all those moments when I should have felt like I was part of something. I never did. I was always the last to be considered. Always the one who had to bend over backwards for everyone else. But on my birthday, the one day I thought would be different, that's when Dad tore me down in front of everyone. That was the last straw. I let my words sink in, watching the silence spread across the conversation like a heavy fog. It was like every second was stretching into an eternity. I could hear her starting to speak again, but this time I cut her off, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Mom, please don't try to defend it. Don't try to justify it. You don't get to make excuses for him anymore. You don't get to apologize for his actions. You've all pushed me aside for so long that I don't even know who I am to you anymore. But I've spent enough years chasing a love that was never really there. Her voice trembled when she finally responded, quieter than before. I never wanted you to feel that way. I never meant to hurt you. I swallowed, feeling the weight of everything I had kept hidden for so long. But you did. And this time, I won't forgive it. There was a long pause. I could practically feel the sorrow in the air, but there was no more guilt or anger in my heart. Just clarity. She was hearing me now, but it was too late. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could sense her holding back tears, and maybe for the first time, she was finally understanding the depth of my pain. But I wasn't going to give her false hope anymore. Mom, I said softly, but firmly, I stopped including those who excluded me. And that's the end of it. There was no apology left, no words that could fix this. All that remained was the cold, hard truth. She hung up. The days that followed felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I no longer had to force a smile at family gatherings, pretending everything was okay. I didn't have to hide my true feelings, suppressing years of hurt, just to keep up the illusion that I still belonged. On my next birthday, I did something I had never done before. I took a solo trip. No extravagant destination. Just a quiet cabin by the lake, far from the chaos, far from the people who had never truly appreciated me. I woke up early that morning to the soft sounds of birds chirping, the fresh scent of pine in the air, and the gentle rustle of leaves outside the window. There was no need for presents or parties. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had finally found peace in my own company. I spent my days hiking along the trails, reading books by the fire, and journaling my thoughts. It was during this trip that I realized something important. I wasn't just free from them. I was free to finally become who I had always wanted to be. There were no more expectations, no more forced roles to play. I could just be me. Over the following months, I continued to embrace this newfound freedom. I took up gardening, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. There was something deeply satisfying about working with the earth, watching flowers bloom and plants grow under my care. It felt symbolic of my own growth, slow, steady, and beautiful in its own time. The quiet moments I spent in the garden gave me the peace I had been craving for so long. I also found joy in writing. Words had always been a quiet companion for me, and now, they were my loudest source of comfort. I began writing short stories, even started a blog where I shared my thoughts on life, healing, and the importance of self-love. I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't anymore. My words were my truth, and they brought me a sense of purpose. And then there was the dog, my sweet little companion, a rescue dog I adopted from a local shelter. Her name was Daisy. I had never realized how much love a pet could bring into your life. She was loyal, playful, and always there when I needed a friend. Together, we spent countless afternoons walking through the park, watching the sunset, and just enjoying the simplicity of life. Daisy became a constant reminder that love didn't have to be conditional. It didn't have to be based on what I did for someone else or how well I fit into their narrative. It just had to be real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone's validation. I wasn't hoping for anyone's approval. I had found my own sense of purpose, my own happiness, and my own peace. And it was more than enough. The guilt that had once weighed me down had faded away, replaced with clarity. I realized I had given enough of myself, tried enough to make things work. Now, I was finally living life on my terms. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about healing, growth, and embracing a future that was mine to shape. Looking out the window at the garden, watching Daisy chase a butterfly, I felt a sense of freedom unlike anything I had ever known. No more shackles. No more regrets. Just a peaceful, contented life. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy. Months passed. Life had continued on in its quiet, peaceful rhythm. I had my garden, my dog, my new friends, and most importantly, my own peace. But then, one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It was from them. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, the weight of it pulling me back into memories I had worked so hard to leave behind. It was from my family, my parents, to be exact. They were asking to reconnect. The letter was filled with apologies, regrets, and, most importantly, a plea for forgiveness. They had finally understood what they had lost. The words seemed genuine, but there was something in the tone that I couldn't ignore. They had been shaken by the realization of their own emptiness. Their lives had come to a halt without me, and now they wanted me back. I sat down, the letter still in my hands, and thought about all the years of hurt, of being excluded and forgotten. My heart didn't ache anymore. That part of me had healed, stitched together with time and self-love. I had grown too much to return to a place where I was never truly valued. Slowly, I pulled out a pen and wrote my reply. It wasn't a long letter, just a few simple lines. I forgave you. But that doesn't mean I'll return. I paused after I wrote those words. There was no bitterness, no anger in my heart, just a quiet truth. I wasn't going back to a life of hollow relationships. I wasn't going to continue pouring my heart into people who had never truly seen me. I sealed the envelope, walked to the mailbox, and slipped it inside. As I returned to my garden, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't holding on to anything anymore. No resentment. No longing. Just freedom. And as I watched Daisy chase after a butterfly in the garden, I couldn't help but smile softly. I had come a long way. The journey had taught me one thing: the most important relationship I could ever nurture was the one I had with myself. And that was enough.